Thanks very much, Steph. I am not Jeff McCausland. My name is Christian Robinson. I'm the other violinist in Silver Birch String Quartet. But on behalf of my colleagues, I just want to, first of all, start off by saying what a great pleasure it is for us to be here at TEDx in Sudbury. To be included alongside some of the singular minds in this city is pretty amazing for us. So it's really a great pleasure for us to be here. And for our contribution today, we want to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk first and then we'll play. Just to give you a bit of background about what it is we're going to be doing. And we're going to be talking a little bit about a big moment in time for our music and one giant personality that changed everything. And that personality was Ludwig van Beethoven. Now, I know what you might be thinking, Beethoven, revolutionary, kind of hard to think of classical music as being this amazing engine of change. But let me start with a personal story. When I was 5 years old and was starting to play the piano, my mom and dad put me in piano lessons. Sitting on top of the piano was this statue of Beethoven. And I was learning, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and it didn't really matter as I got older. Beethoven was always there. And for me, the image of Beethoven became the image of classical music. And if you've ever seen any of the pictures of Beethoven, he looks like a really angry guy, very serious. He sort of scowls at you. And to me, that's sort of what classical music came to represent when I was younger. It was this old, scary, sour, frowning, angry kind of a thing. And what I found as I got a little bit older and I started doing a lot of my own research into Beethoven was how Beethoven was a real revolutionary. What's up on the screen right now is a concert review from 1853 of one of Beethoven's symphonies. Now, this particular symphony that the review is for is the Ninth Symphony. Now, the Ninth Symphony has become one of the most loved pieces of classical music ever. And the last movement that this review totally is slamming it's based on the famous Ode to Joy, which is maybe the most loved tune in all of classical music. For those of you who are of a certain age, you may know it as the Drink Milk, Love Life song. So it's a famous piece of classical music. So reading this, it seems a little bit strange how something to us that's so loved could at the time be so rejected and looked at as being really, really terrible. So you might think that this would be maybe just an aberrant review, that maybe they just didn't get it. But the fact is that at the time, Beethoven was looked on as kind of having lost it a little bit. He was a guy that most educated classical music lovers at the time thought, well, he started off really well. But then with his increased deafness, it just became, his music started getting too weird and we don't understand it. So you would think that this might be an aberrant view, but it actually wasn't. This was the establishment view of Beethoven at the time. And so we're starting to see Beethoven as revolutionary. So what was he doing that was so different? What was he doing that upset everyone? He was, without getting too classical music geeky on you here, he was taking everything that composers were already doing and expanding and amplifying it to an incredible degree. He was writing pieces that were longer, more harmonically challenging and inventive, and he was putting huge demands, technical demands, on his performers. He was making them work really, really, really hard. And as someone who plays a lot of Beethoven, I can tell you it doesn't get any easier 200 years later. Now, it didn't help, of course, at the time that Beethoven was a notoriously difficult person to get along with. This is a really great quote. I love this. Reading this, you get a sense that Beethoven was talking to maybe some Philistine prince that, he didn't really know music and he didn't really care about music and he had done something to really grievously offend him. But what's interesting about this quote is actually that the prince in question here, that Beethoven is chastising and saying, I am Beethoven and there'll be lots of you and only one of me, this was actually a big fan of Beethoven's. This was a big supporter. He was the guy that was writing the big checks to get all of these pieces written. So you start to see how difficult Beethoven was. He was going to create things his way, and it didn't matter what that was. Now, that way was also very difficult for him. And Beethoven took the craft of composing very, very, very seriously. And it was a tremendous effort for him. In his correspondence, you read about the struggle that he had when he was composing, that it didn't come easily to him. And to me, there's no better example of this than taking a quick look at some handwritten Beethoven scores and comparing them with some handwritten scores of a composer that came a little bit before him, another guy that we all love, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So let's start with Mozart. Here's the very last string quartet by Mozart. Now bear in mind, this is Mozart's handwriting that you see here, quill and ink. Now if you have a look here, this is a string quartet. So we've got 4 instruments. There's first violin, second violin, viola, and cello. And what's amazing about this is that this is a first draft. This is Mozart literally coming from his head onto the page. And look at how clean it is. Even the bar lines are actually pretty straight. It's all done by hand, again, quill and ink. Here's another string quartet by Mozart, his most famous one, the Dissonance String Quartet. Much bigger piece of paper, actually. The actual score is quite large. And again, you can see there's no smudges. It's as if some supernatural force has placed this into his mind, and out it comes in perfect, perfect form. So let's skip over and look at Beethoven now. This is one of his last string quartets, the Opus 131. Have a look at this. Here we've got some ideas in the viola part. Now scratch those out, those don't make any sense. Here's the first violin. Oh, no, scratch that out. Here he's given up totally on the second violin and the viola part. I mean, look, it's totally empty down here. Here's the cello part down here. Well, we've got something for the cello, and then we've got, oh no, that doesn't make any sense. So again, we've got Beethoven struggling. He's trying to make it work, and it's just not for him. And now my favorite example. This is from a cello sonata that's a little bit earlier than this. Wow. So have a look. All these black marks, to get it that dark using the quill and ink, this is Beethoven angry. Really, really angry. He's scratching it out. It's terrible. You sense this incredible struggle. And so composing is something that did not come easily to Beethoven. So Beethoven and the nature of change. What can we take away from Beethoven's process here? I think the first thing is that true change is profoundly disruptive. Beethoven's music was not accepted at the time as being this wonderful thing. People didn't know what to make of it. So I think that that's something that's a great takeaway for us as well, that these bold ideas that he had, true change may not be accepted right away. The next thing is demand as much from yourself as you demand from other people. Beethoven fought and struggled with himself to get his vision onto the paper. It wasn't something that came incredibly easily to him. And let's face it, if Beethoven had just been really a mean guy to everyone around him and hadn't written what he wrote, we would just look at him as another jerk. But the fact that he demanded so much of himself and wrote this incredible music is what really makes him last for all this time. And then last but not least, there's one slide that is hidden somehow down there. Anyways, the last point that I was going to make is that don't expect to get it right the first time. And we saw a lot of Beethoven's practice at work in those manuscripts. And in his manuscripts, this was not a smooth, even evolution in a perfectly straight line from his idea to the finished product. It was a struggle. And to me, this is the greatest lesson that we can learn from Beethoven. And it's the lesson that my piano teacher never told me. It's the fact that our imperfections are not a limitation, they're actually a strength. That our ideas don't have to be perfect right away. And that truly following a strong inner vision can actually mean constantly reevaluating and reimagining those ideas. And this is true, I think, for whether we're reimagining or revisioning an art form or a city or an entire society. Mozart may speak to the divine, but for me, Beethoven speaks to our humanity. It's imperfect and it's struggling, but it's always committed. and it's capable of greatness that will last all the way across the centuries. Thanks very much. Bye.